Afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our session this afternoon. We're going to spend a couple of minutes just letting people join the waiting room and be let in. But I hope you're having glorious days. We had the luxury of our last session at the end of April being on Earth Day, so we can't quite say that this time round, but equally hope you've been able to enjoy the sunshine. Well, yeah, we'll wait a couple of minutes for those joining now, just for everyone to join the meeting room, and then we will get started. For those of you who maybe caught also the recording in progress, we will be recording this session and we'll cover that in housekeeping as well. So if you have a preference to not be recorded, I might suggest turning cameras off, or cameras are also welcome on if that's not a problem for you as well. I can see people joining us, we're letting people in. Yeah, Jim, we're more than happy to share the recording after so that you can use it internally for referencing or share it with colleagues who maybe can't make this session today. So yeah, it will be shared. We're going live in a minute. Like in one more minute, we've got some people joining now. I appreciate it's just after lunch, so there's probably some people who are just wrapping up their lunch breaks joining us this afternoon. Great. Well, I think we might actually make a start because we've got quite a lot of content to cover. And obviously, we'll start with introductions as a starting place. So, for anyone joining us either now or in a couple of minutes' time, they won't miss out on too much of the content for today's session. But welcome to today's focus session on talking about measuring, reporting, and taking action with a real focus on Scope 3 emissions. And thank you for joining us. Obviously, we'll let people in as we go. I think today my colleague is on the case with that, and we'll do intros in a minute. But to start us off, as an introduction of what we'll actually be covering today, we are looking at reporting your environmental impacts. Scope 3, what is it, how to report your data and how to take action, and a demonstration of the free CC tools and resources you can access to support your reporting at any stage that you might be in. As an introduction to myself, before I let my wonderful colleague Tanea introduce herself, I am Grace. I'm a cisgendered white woman in my late 20s with long brown curly hair, glasses and a blue jumper on today. My role at Julie's Bicycle is an environmental coordinator, and really I help to support art and cultural organisations in reporting their environmental impacts, how to reduce them, and provide support for the free CC tools that are available. I will pass over quickly to Tanea to say hello and introduce herself as well.
Thank you, Grace. I'm Tanea. I am a cis white woman, also in her late 20s, also with glasses, wearing a red jumper to differentiate from Grace, and I have straight hair, and a fake blurry background of plants. And I am a climate change and sustainability specialist, and I support organizations across the arts sector to take action on the climate, nature, and justice crises. Thanks, Grace.
Oh, thank you so much, Tanea. And something worth mentioning as well, just before we come on to housekeeping, which is again also mentioned for those who may be joining us over the next couple of minutes. If captions will be helpful for this session, you can find those in the settings function. So please do make use of those if that is helpful to do so. And I will assume that many of us actually joining today are familiar with Julie's Bicycle and who we are as an organisation. But for those of you who maybe aren't or have been shared that last minute kind of link to this session in an email this morning, a little bit about us for today. So we are a not-for-profit that unites culture, creativity and climate action to drive change. Our team combines cultural and environmental sector experience and knowledge to build expertise in the creative climate movement. We work in kind of three core strategic partnerships to deliver skills training, leadership development, and a cultural and climate policy and advocacy. We were founded nearly 20 years ago now, and JB has partnered and supported over 2,000 organisations, networks, and artists. The work that we do helps to generate insights and ideas relevant to both climate and cultural policies, and is a platform to celebrate the leadership and amplify the voice of culture in shaping the solutions we need now and for the future. For those of you just joining, welcome, welcome for everyone. And yeah, we're just kind of going through housekeeping and what we're covering today. And again, I just think we've had a couple join us. So if there are captions that might be helpful, please find those in the settings. That is there for you to do so. So the session today, we have three core aims to help split up how we're going to navigate the workshop this afternoon, with the first being to understand scope 1, 2 and 3 emissions. We're then kind of looking at learning of industry support and guidance to support on your reporting journey. and then identifying actually how you can get started on taking action on reducing your Scope 3 emissions. This session agenda is on the right, and that covers a range of things from a brief introduction of housekeeping intros, which we're doing at the moment, what you need to know for the now live environmental reporting period for Arts Council England 2025 to 26, Scope 1, 2 and 3, focusing really in on Scope 3, reporting and taking actions there. We'll have a quick demonstration of the CC tools and how to find helpful resources that will support your journey, and then wrapping us up with some top tips and next steps on what you can get started on no matter where you might be in your journey. We will also have some time for Q&A towards the end, which brings us on to housekeeping. If you have questions as you go, I think we've already had maybe a couple in the chat. Please use the chat function. Either myself or Tanea, depending on who's presenting, will be able to support you on your questions. And if there's not quite time in the process of us presenting, we'll try and make sure there's time to come back to those at the end. So please do make use of that. We kindly ask that microphones are kept off just so that we can really kind of focus in and have a space to be able to focus on the session this afternoon. Captions, again, are available in the settings if that's helpful for you. So please do enable those in the settings function, and we can support finding those if there's any issues there. And make use of the chat. Again, we're available to help support. And the way that we like to think of these sessions is that no question is a silly question. If you're thinking of something, it's very likely someone else will be as well. So please, drop that in. We can help support and get you some guidance on there in the meantime. This is also a really safe space for us all to connect, learn, and be curious. Please be kind and generous with yourselves, but also to each other, as we really acknowledge that there'll be a likely range of experience, knowledge levels, and we each experience the world differently. So just a real kind note on that. And finally, for those of you who didn't catch the really obvious recording now at the very start, we are recording. So if you prefer not to be recorded, please do switch your cameras off. I think we've got housekeeping covered now. And before we jump into the real detail of today's session, and if you've joined some of our other sessions before, this may look somewhat familiar, but it's really important we actually spend a brief moment reflecting on why we're here and what we really want you to take away from today's session. You can see here progress over perfection, and it's really truly what we believe the main purpose of sessions like these are for when either starting or progressing on your sustainability journey. Progress is great, but perfection, although it'd be wonderful to have perfection right from the starting gate, we recognise that progress is the thing we should really be focusing on, taking those small steps that add to cumulative action in the long run. If it is in the early days of your environmental journey, it really is no problem at all, as we see this as an opportunity for progression. So it's just a nice way to frame it. We're not here as all as experts, and we're here to learn as well. Now, with sessions like this, we realise they can feel a little bit like slide presentation heavy, but we love to have a little bit of engagement wherever we can. So that's why we're really making use of the chat if and when it's appropriate to do so. So to warm us up, we would love for you to join the Slido on the screen that you're seeing now with the QR code. You can scan it on a smartphone or a smart device. And in a moment, we'll have a couple of questions just to gauge how we're feeling in the room this afternoon and where we may be at coming into this session, maybe reporting or any challenges that you might be facing. Something to note is there is absolutely no right or wrong answer at all, and it is completely anonymous. So you can write whatever you like and no one will know. So hopefully that helps. So I will move us on, and the QR code is still on the left-hand side of this screen if you didn't quite get a chance to get it in the first bit. I think the link has been put in the chat. Thank you, Tanea. So the first question is, how confident do you feel when measuring, reporting and taking action on Scope 3 emissions? 1 being not very, and maybe it's quite a daunting thing to start tackling. 10 being, I'm an expert, I'm a pro, I know everything there is that I need to know about that. Wonderful. And yes, I can see there's obviously like a real range of responses coming in, perhaps those less familiar with Scope 3 and how to start taking action there. 5 is right in the middle, actually, we're coming through. So maybe you know some things, but maybe not how to take action, or there's some nuances there that you're not quite sure on how to navigate next. Wonderful. Wait one more moment just for anyone who's just submitting an answer through. Perfect. So yeah, average score about 4.2. And this session today, and I should have mentioned this in frame, is very much meant as like kind of an entry level to Scope 3 reporting, but also understanding the actions you can take. So hopefully this will help take away some actions and things you can start tackling no matter where you may be on your journey. Now, on to our next warm-up question. what comes to mind when you think of sustainability? And this is one of the the word ones that you can type in an answer for. So you can answer one or a couple of answers as well. And it may be things that you're doing in your organization, perhaps in your personal life, or maybe even feelings actually that come up when you think of this word. Whilst you add in your answers, and you can add in multiple. So for me, I think of collective action and really being quite hot on recycling at home, making sure I'm like separating things out in the right way. Tanea, I'm not going to try not to put you on the spot, but I realise that's exactly what I've done. Comes to mind for you when you think of sustainability?
Mm. Intersectionality with everything
Hmm.
else. So I
Yeah.
guess everything is a bit
Yeah.
the world.
Yes, literally everything, isn't it? Everything is connected when it comes to sustainability. And just looking at some of the answers we've got through now, we've got the environment, we've got recycling, the planet. Holistic, yep, great. Consider travel, the future, saving the planet, teamwork, which is a really important one, which we definitely talk about quite a lot in this session. Using fewer resources, Data Green Book, love that shout out there. Yep, you're probably quite familiar with that. Responsibility and creativity, reflecting on all of your actions. Yeah, exactly that. Never ending. Yeah, I think we recognize that working in the sector, but also in sustainability. The journey's never quite finished. There's always something we can be doing no matter where we're at. The way forward. Yeah, building that into policies, procedures, the way of living and the way of existing, both individually as organisations too. Capitalism. Yeah, lots of really great answers there. Thank you so much for everyone who's put that in. And environment, right at the very top and centre, which is, what we're all here to try and work towards and to save. So thank you for the answers. And we recognise that probably many of you, if not all of you, are actually calling in from an Arts Council MPO. So you may be aware we are actually now in the annual reporting window now, which opened on the 5th of May, so last Tuesday. And we'll just spend a short moment before we get into the real detail of Scope 3 and how to take action, just to review all the information you need to know. So as a really quick intro to JB and Arts Council England, we work together to embed environmental responsibility across the cultural sector. Through our long-standing partnership, we support organisations and individuals within the tools to share knowledge and skills to take meaningful climate action. We've been working together since 2012, and the programme has enabled hundreds of organisations to track their environmental impact, build resilience, and lead change across the arts and cultural sector. Before we cover this year's reporting, it's important for us to also recognise the success and the impact which last year's reporting had, covering from 2024 to 2025 period. And I actually expect probably a number of you contributed to these figures, so thank you. We had a grand total of 558 MPOs reporting in the last reporting window, which is around about 57% of the whole portfolio. And this is the number of organisations who directly submitted environmental data into the CC tools. The total emissions for the reporting portfolio is around 11,000. Apologies. The total emissions for the reporting window are 115,960 tonnes of CO2 equivalent. And it's important to recognise that this figure excludes audience travel. Whilst we appreciate it's hard to translate this, like what exactly does that equate to? When we look at translating that to the number of people in the UK's carbon footprint averages, that's around about 11,600 people in the UK. And I think I certainly feel, I know that Tanea and I, we talk about it a lot, but when we watch the news and in our networks, we see climate impacts in our communities and feel uncertain of the future. And one thing is very much for sure is that for every year that climate action accelerates, the creative and cultural sector continues to rise to the challenge. Through our close work with the sector and talking to individuals within organisations, we understand that you likely face a really broad range of challenges, whether it be from team capacity, funding, resourcing, attendance, or a mix of those and others too. This session today is very much aimed at being easy, digestible, and supporting you where you are at now and how you can start planning for climate action both now and for the future. Each year, we ask MPOs to report their environmental data to the free CC tools, and it's important for us to highlight actually why you should get involved if we haven't quite sold it to you just yet. So the first is, you get to contribute to a collective reporting approach. So by reporting your environmental data, you join hundreds of other MPOs in measuring and reporting your carbon and beyond carbon data. This helps to build an understanding of the carbon impact and to provide a snapshot of the environmental impacts for the creative sector. Coming on to then support on drawing insights about what the sector needs. So through the collective reporting, the data is then crucial to actually draw out insights on what the sector may be finding challenging with the sustainability efforts and where support is then needed to unlock further action. We then come on to inspiration for new creative ideas, which is probably one of my favourites, is that sustainability is not a perfect journey, yet the creative sector is in a prime position to think creatively about how to tackle sustainability challenges, both within the sector, but to support broader climate change initiatives and awareness to all. This might be from things like your programming, your exhibitions, your workshopping, and the possibilities are truly endless on how the creative sector can support broader global sustainability goals. This one catches a lot of attention, and I completely understand why. Reduced cost. And this is one thing that we can say quite often, that cutting carbon will help you save costs. From exploring your renewable energy tariffs to adopting best practices in your workspaces, like turning your lights off and seeing your energy usage drop, and then increasing efficiencies too. This in time can help you save your costs. This is a huge one, and I think we definitely experience this each year when we come around to kind of publishing the annual report, but you get the chance to then celebrate the sector's successes. So whilst we understand there are challenges, there are obviously successes and stories to share too. This is mainly done through the submitting of the Beyond Carbon surveys, and we are able to then identify trends across the sector on stories of successes and action taken within organisations and then get the chance to celebrate them. You may have actually seen our case studies from our previous year's data submissions, which highlight these stories. They do include things of, the challenges, the solutions, and opportunities for taking that action and sharing those learnings too. So if you haven't, I would definitely recommend taking a read through those. And then finally, we're coming on to creating a platform to influence policy. With data, stories, and direct contact to the sector, we're actually able to provide insights to what the policy needs to do to support the transition to net zero within the creative sector. So this is why you should get involved slide. So hopefully a couple of these resonate and land really well with you. And for those of you who report data annually, to maybe those of you joining the session this afternoon who may be looking to report for the first time, which is absolutely wonderful, and we're really happy to have you here, we are now actually in the 2025-26 annual reporting window, which closes on the 26th of June, inclusive of that day. So you have right up until 11:59 p.m. that evening to submit your data. You can add your data into the free CC tools across this window, so you can start adding data in now or submit data you've maybe already got in there, just making sure to submit before that final deadline on the 26th of June. If you can submit sooner, please feel free to do so. It definitely helps us with managing data quality checks on our side of things. And we've had a really good number of submissions already and excited to see what the grand total will be in about 7 weeks' time when that window closes. We have a really quick checklist here, just on some things to do to support your reporting journey and a bit of like a checklist of where to go now. So firstly, obviously log in or create a CC Tools account. You then can invite your colleagues who may be helping your data submission. And here is a key one, add in your data. If you have questions, we're also here to support throughout. So we've got obviously sessions like these. We'll have some one-on-one drop-in sessions later in June, and we have a really wide wealth of resources available online that we will reference at the end of this presentation of where to access more help if you need to. And then at the very end, when you're happy with your submission, the chance to submit your data. We will cover each of these steps across the session this afternoon. But something to note is, and some of you may be really familiar with this already, but for those perhaps not as much, alongside carbon data, don't forget to tell us what you have been doing in addition to carbon too by completing and submitting a Beyond Carbon survey. It only takes about 10 minutes to complete and is survey styled, so you don't need to worry about getting raw data to hand, like your business travel mileage or the kilowatt hours. You can just complete this survey as a written form. The type of things that are in here is whether you have an environmental policy, do you communicate your environmental performance to your stakeholders, what benefits you may have been experiencing from taking action, and also if you have renewable energy contracts. So they're the type of questions that we'll be asking in that survey. And this is really how we draw out sector insights alongside the carbon data to paint a picture of what your organisations are doing in broader sustainability efforts. We completely appreciate that carbon only tells a part of the story, and actually the action you're taking internally can really be a more holistic way to share the efforts you are doing in your organisation. This is how we also select and draw on case studies. So we also do have that option, which is on the right hand side, to tell us a story. And that's how you can tell us what you've been doing in your own words that may not quite fit into either carbon or the rest of the survey for Be On Carbon. There is also the option for you to upload your environmental policies and action plans on the platform itself. So you can feel free to do that to keep it in one place and make sure that anyone in your organisation has access to that too. I think we've covered everything with what you need to know, the real core dates and things for this environmental reporting period. So I will actually take the chance to hand over to Tanea, who will start talking us through scope 1, 2, and 3. So over to you, Tanea.
Thank you so much. Sorry, excuse me. And yeah, thank you for the great intro, Grace. So I'll be talking through scope 1, 2, and 3, which is a way to model carbon accounting emissions. This is based off the Greenhouse Gas Protocol if you are interested in the detail, but it's just important to remember that it's a model and there are many, many different ways you can account for carbon emissions, and also it's all imperfect, and it's all based on a lot of assumptions. So take everything with a grain of salt, and as Grace said at the start, progress is much better over perfection. So when we talk about there's three scope areas. We first have scope 1, which are emissions that you're directly responsible for. So this will be if you own vehicles or generators. And then the second scope is from energy that you buy. So that would tend to be everyone's electricity. And then the final one, scope 3, is emissions from literally everything else. So things that aren't owned or controlled by you, but what you maybe indirectly affect and your upstream and downstream supply chain. So with scope 1, just quickly to cover sort of action you can take in these areas. You can move from gas to electric where you can, or when gas boilers go when it's due for replacement, and then purchasing or EVs instead of fossil fuel powered cars, and using generators that maybe run on electricity or hydrogen or biofuel. And then the second part is for scope 2. This is so your energy that you buy. Using less overall is obviously preferred because it will save you money as well. But efficiency with appliances, smart plugs, insulation, things like that. And then also purchasing a green tariff. So some companies there that are investing in renewables within the UK, and matching all their power to renewables in the UK as well, is good to look for. But obviously today we're focusing on scope 3. So scope 1 and 2, when you talk about, this is again part of the greenhouse gas sort of the greenhouse gas protocol framework. Everyone reports on 1 and 2, but then scope 3, what you can report on really differs depending on what you do. So there's all these categories. There's a lot here, and the top part, so like 1 to 8 tends to be all your upstream suppliers, and then the bottom is downstream. Some things don't quite fit. So audience travel, for example, is and people argue about where that could fit in. And then, this is made for, I guess, a sort of corporate audience. And so that can look a lot different depending on the organization that you are. And again, a reminder that we don't have to fit into these really significant details. I think the corporate the document of this is like many, many, many pages. So we're just trying to do what we can. So the next slide is showing, like, for example, a theatre or like a fixed building might be looking at purchase goods and services, waste, travel, and then maybe employee commuting because they have people coming in every single day, and investments. And then a touring company, for example, might not look at commuting at all, but would be looking at some other similar areas. And then a festival that's maybe renting a large amount of equipment for a particular event that might be included in there, but maybe they won't look at employees, and all of them are looking at audience travel as well. So that's something to consider. But yeah, I guess basically don't get stuck in the details, and think about what is in your control and what your biggest impact area is. So for a touring company, audience travel might be really, really big if they have a big audience, or freight and business travel between locations might also be large if they're moving big pieces of work, for example. So when we think about scope three overall, again, we want to think about where our highest impacts come from, what we can control, and definitely just taking action because most organizations, their scope three emissions are between 80 to 90% of their greenhouse gas emissions. So we don't want to ignore it, but we just want to make sure that we're not biting off way more than we can chew and then feeling very, very overwhelmed. So just keeping it realistic. So to that action, the purple on the slide that's coming up is showing what we're focusing on today. So goods and services, and then transportation, waste, travel, and investments. And you can see there's lots of other categories in there if you really want to go on a deep dive. Again, the Creative Climate Tools doesn't focus on all these things because we want to focus on what's relevant to people and yeah, just make it easy for people and simple so that you can come in at a really, really basic level if you want to. Just to cover quickly, we talk about, or you might hear emissions boundaries. There's about three areas, three approaches that you can take for measuring emissions. So you can do equity, which is basically about like financial control. Sorry, not financial control, like your economic share, and then financial control, and then operational control. So, for example, a collaborative touring project across like three different venues, maybe. Equity is calculating the footprint of the whole project, and then you report on a third of the emissions, because in this example, you have a third share, like you're splitting it between the cost of the project between three uh, organizations. Finances only report on what you pay for. So that will mostly be things in your venue, but maybe then the van to the next one. And then finally, operational is reporting on the shows or rehearsals in your venue or space, not the other shows. So then you would maybe see if you have renewable energy and another venue doesn't, the footprints would look different, even though it's the same sort of show. So that's just an example of maybe how you want to think about if you're doing something that's a bit less typical than just an organization over the whole year. So we're going to go into each category, and for each one of them, we'll have like a measurement and then like how to measure and then some actions that you can take. And then the purple in the top corner will tend to flag who this is most relevant for. So for category one, which is purchase goods and services, this is looking at, you can look at like how much money you're spending on particular things, and there's online resources that can give you the sort of carbon coefficients, they're called, for that, which is just like how carbon intensive that particular category of spending is. Or you can look at a life cycle analysis of something. So you could work, if you were getting a really big stage created, you could work with a supplier and really try and understand where their materials are coming from and things like that. And that's what people do when they do like an environmental, that's like a life cycle analysis. We don't do this category except as part of materials and waste. So when you put in waste in the tools, you can click like do a life cycle analysis, and it will also take into account the emissions used to create that waste. So if you're throwing out paper, it will also incorporate the emissions that were emitted when that paper was created, but it doesn't cover all. We don't cover, for example, like hiring of venues because that's something that is technically purchased goods and services for some people, if but we don't like have that because again, it's just detail that we find is often not needed for most users, and it's maybe the sort of people at the leading edge that will need that. And it also doesn't cover a lot of things. So biodiversity, justice, workers' rights is not considered in the way we measure carbon here. But with actions that you can take, you can write quite clear procurement guidelines to understand what you're buying, when you're buying it, which again can save you money. Just buy less overall by reusing or recycling or renting or making modular sets. Using offcuts from different community groups, maybe. Um, Food as well, which can be a big category. If you're picking more local and organic product, there's a platform that's linked, and we'll share the slides afterwards because someone in the last session asked about how to calculate food emissions. There's a free platform there that you can use, and tending to just choose suppliers with third-party certifications, which so like B Corp or FSC certified like paper or organizations with ISO certifications. But again, that can make you benefit bigger organizations that have the sort of administrative backing to get that certification. So we just really encourage you to, it seems silly to say, look at their vibes, but see if you can really understand who the suppliers are. And if you're working locally and in a really close partnership, that is so much better than maybe importing some goods from 3 countries away because they have B Corp. So it's very much based on values and things like that, which is why procurement guidelines can really help. And you can also look at other resources like ethical consumer or boycott, divest, and sanctions lists to understand where you are getting products from. So, an example of working locally is the Royal Ballet and Opera's Sustainable Supplies Form and Spreadsheet, which ACE and the National Theatre and Theatre Green Book and us as well were also involved in supporting, which is basically a standardized collection of sustainability information about common suppliers, particularly across theatres. And that means that the supplier is both encouraged to think about their sustainability and organizations have all the information there. So that form is available online and I'll pop the link in the chat. And another example of purchase goods and services is digital emissions. So this again, with my ongoing message that things aren't perfect. This could fall into upstream with like the way you're developing a website, how many emails you're sending, maybe like an online platform if you're doing remote or online rehearsals, and then downstream, which is, if people are looking at your recordings, performances, or buying tickets and things like that. We don't cover this in the tools, but it can go in the custom emissions tab. And there are some great online resources by the Green Web Foundation and Whole Grain Digital and things like that that have lots of information on that. So you can have a bit of a deep dive because obviously with the use of the rise of AI and creative tech is a growing industry, all very complex and can have quite significant emissions, but also is a really growing area. The final example that I have for purchase goods and services is water as well. So we have this as a category in the tools, and you can measure water use and wastewater, usually on your sewage bills in cubic meters or liters, which literally I forgot that meters cubed is not the same as a liter, so don't do that. And remember that one's 1,000 times bigger than the other. I don't know how it was me. It was just a funny brain moment that I was laughing at myself the other day. But to take action on this area, I guess low flow taps, sensors, um, to improve water efficiency is great, and not letting leaks live there forever because they absolutely will save you money if you get them fixed. And then water tanks as well, can if you have the space, or maybe if you have like your own rooftop or anything like that, can really help. And then we have a bunch of resources as well that are available, which I'll pop in the chat as well on water management. So the next category is upstream transportation and distribution. So we just call this freight, because that's basically what it is. And that's looking at the types of vehicles that you're using to transport things, how far they're traveling from, and how heavy the materials are being transported. Overall, just I guess looking at how much fuel you're using. And then to think about, so most relevant for touring or events, if you're just moving big pieces of equipment or sets between locations. And you can look at more modular sets or building sets locally and using local suppliers, so that you're not transporting stages across really, really long distances. Yeah. So the next category is waste. Um, this is pretty, I guess, straightforward, is just to weigh your waste and also understand what is in there. So you can do this maybe like if you just do it consistently, you could look just for a week at, like, in a typical week, how much waste are you creating and what's the typical makeup of it? And you can like check your bins at various intervals, or you could do it, and you could do that once or twice a year, and then that's how you calculate your waste emissions. And in the tools, you can put in a bunch of different types of bins, so you don't have to go and get like some scales and be standing there with a rubbish bin carried to your chest, because it would work, but wouldn't be as fun. And you can just say we had, two 60-liter rubbish bins that were full of XYZ, and then figure that out. And this, so again, that can help you with the actions to understand, okay, like what are we continually throwing in landfill and how can we replace these with reusable things? Or if we keep throwing out plastic packaging, can we use paper-based packaging? Can we talk to our suppliers and understand, what they're trying to do as well? Because I guarantee you, suppliers are thinking about this. And then overall, just buying less. So we really want to move in that diagram. You can see we really want to move from the typical take and make and then waste towards a more circular economy where things are repaired a lot more, and we're just using less, and purchasing less overall, and we're, I guess, so that we're not also using up a bunch of resources to recycle things, and then every time getting less and less effective. Like, just think whether or not you need something in the first place. And as I said before, with the materials section, on the tools, we have the option to calculate the initial emissions from creating a product that is then ending up in your rubbish as well. We also have business travel. So this is looking at how to measure this, is asking how far someone traveled, their mode of transport, and it's really helpful to incorporate this with existing reporting. So expenses or things like that to make your whole life easier, really. And then you can see maybe where people are traveling the most, what they're traveling for, understanding why someone maybe chose to fly, or so that you can reassess that need in the future. And obviously, the little triangle is showing that walking and wheeling is wonderful, and cycling, and public transport and flying is avoidable if possible, because it's the most impactful. But then again, business class has a much bigger impact than economy class. So there's trade-offs, and you can also, I guess, you have to recognize that travel doesn't look at, or that little diagram doesn't look at who gets to travel, in terms of, if you're saying, oh, we're only going to we're only going to invite local people to be our VIPs or performers at an event, and then you're sort of excluding maybe people from the global south or outside of the UK to have those opportunities. So it's a consideration. And also slower travel can be harder for some people if they have accessibility requirements or care requirements, or just time, and it can be expensive. So it's just if you can and if you have the choice to travel via a more sustainable method, then um, it's a really great place to start. Also, because I guess another thing that's not covered by this measurement strictly is the biodiversity impacts of travel. We know air pollution in the UK is it's a really big health issue, and transport emissions are not going down. So it's just something else to think about that we don't just want to focus on carbon. So if we pop into the next slide, we also have audience travel. So I've also just put two links to resources in there about business and audience travel in the chat. Um, but again, same thing, distance mode, and you can do this through surveys or maybe during the ticketing process, asking them how they're planning to travel. And that will help you understand how people get to your venue or event, and maybe how you can incentivize with bike storage or fun exclusive content. Like, if you cycled and locked their bike up in a particular area, there's a little poster with a QR code and they get to see backstage videos or something like that. But again, considering accessibility to just really encourage those that can. We're not trying to shame anyone that can't. Um, Travel greener. Um, and then also that having data on audience travel can really help you work with public transport providers and understand the specific um, challenges around your location. Maybe it's just like a slightly mistimed bus route or something like that. And maybe you might not have the opportunity to, change a whole bus timetable. But if in 2 years, the council's putting out a request of like, hey, we want feedback, you have all that data really ready. So it's just sort of depending on your level of control and influence as well. It's good to have that information. And audience travel tends to be the biggest Scope 3 emission and overall probably the biggest category of emission that we see across all arts organizations. So it's a really, really powerful way to make change because you can not only reduce the emissions of people around your show, but influence their behavior, maybe when they go to other events, if they're shown that sustainable travel is fun and easy. Thank you. Oh, the final thing that I forgot to say for that slide, sorry, is that I don't have a slide on employer commuting, but the same applies for people because it's just like how a one-off survey to understand how they're getting into work. Yeah, which is helpful. So the last category is investments. Um, so you can measure this through spend-based. The tools doesn't do this, but I just still wanted to raise it because, and also, sorry, measuring the carbon with spend-based doesn't consider like justice in terms of what you're funding. But this is really relevant for everyone because the action areas for this are really, really easy, even if you don't measure it, in terms of just divesting money, basically. So do you want to invest in oil and gas? Do you want to invest in war, in weapons, in the genocide and ecocides that are happening around the world? I would hope the answer is no, but having a discussion about that around what your organizational values are, and whether you can move your banking or your pensions or your insurance. There's lots of resources there, including a few great campaigns from a UK organization called Tipping Point. And I guess it's just thinking that it's not necessarily easy, particularly if you're going to think about who you'll accept funding from. A lot of big organizations that have the money to fund arts organizations are not always ethical, but if you've had a discussion about it and are just aware of it, it can be really powerful. And you can often, I know organizations have set up funding sort of frameworks where they ask for more funding from particular funders if they're um, higher emitters. So I think the BFI, for example, puts like a levy on their particular funding that they're asking for from certain organizations based on their carbon footprint, which is like a really interesting approach. Um, I'm going to hand back to Grace to talk you through the CC tools now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Tanaya. And we completely recognise that we've gone through a lot of perhaps some new things, some things you might have been familiar with. And again, we will share these slides after so you can take a look outside of this session and in your own time if there are specific areas you want to take action on. Because we do recognise, we have an hour and a half today. It's a lot to cover in that time. So we'll share everything afterwards in follow up. But coming on to the CC tools specifically, some of you, obviously, I assume, are very familiar with it, or at least have heard of it, I hope. But it was launched in 2009, formerly known as the Creative Green Tools, and were the first globally recognized and leading online environmental tools specifically designed for the arts and cultural sector. It's completely free to use, so there's no charge to you as an organization. And it's designed to help you track and understand your impacts and allows you to measure a really wide range of areas from your energy use, your water consumption, your waste, your project waste, and your travel too, as we've just sort of covered with Tanea. The things it can help you to do are firstly to know your impact, so through understanding your carbon footprint and identify those areas for improvement. Track your progress, which is obviously a really key one, to help monitor your reductions and improvements over time. Benchmark and grow. So compare your data with industry peers and identify your own opportunities for growth and progress. You can simplify and save time, which again, I know is probably a really big one for us in the audience today. So helping to streamline that reporting process, saving you time and effort, along with then empowering your organization. So the strategic insights, data-driven decision making is what we like to call it. And then there are a couple of additional features such as an ROI calculator and beyond carbon survey. We won't go into like a full demo of the tools because there's quite a lot to do there, but I will just share my screen to give you a little bit of like a navigation of where to find resources, how to sign up and how to sign in. And then we'll come back to talk about some top tips for actually using the tools and what is best for this reporting period. If this is your first time today, hopefully you'll pop a link in the chat if you don't mind for this. That'd be great. I think you're on that vibe and nod you just gave. If you're needing to sign up or it's the first time logging in, please come to the sign up page where it'll ask for your organisation name, where you're based, how big you are as an organisation, your sector, along with your calendar or financial year. And then if you are part of an active funding portfolio, so assuming we are NPOs or if you're from the BFI, please select yes. This is really important for us when we do the data analysis to make sure we're getting all of your lovely carbon data through. And then obviously just like basic details of like your name, your email, and how to create a password. Something worth noting on here is that if your organization has an account or you're familiar, perhaps colleagues already have an existing account with the CC tools, there is a way to invite users within the main framework of your organization. So if one already exists, please ask a colleague to invite you along to join that platform, and I will show you how to do that in a minute. I will just sign in to show you exactly that, and you'll have to excuse a lot of testing data is on this tool for my login. But right at the very top, we've got a reminder of the reporting deadlines, the dates, and exactly what we're asking you to do and submit data for, along with the resources and the bite-sized videos, which are really helpful. Talking to the point of, how do I, if there's a colleague who wants to get involved, or maybe we have an organizational account, but the responsibilities shifted internally, how to do that. On the top right-hand side, underneath organizational details, there is an add new users, and all you need to do is put the email address of the colleague you're wishing to invite, send that over, and then they'll get a sign up link that will link directly to your organizational account. So please make sure you do that. If you do have trouble accessing that, or perhaps there was a handover that didn't quite include the details of how to do this internally in your organization, you can reach us at our support help desk and we can do this manually for you. That is no problem whatsoever. For adding data, again, you'll see quite a lot of our testing data here, so please excuse that. But all you need to do is come right down to the very bottom and either add a new building, which can be an office, or if you are a venue or cultural building, select that option, or indeed a new project, which includes things like if it's an outdoor event, if it's an indoor event, if it's a tour or a custom project, where you can then select specific categories that you want to measure within a carbon footprint. I won't go into the real detail of every type of way you can report on there because we have plenty of user guides and videos for each of the steps following this point, and we don't want to lose any of you today to the session to a demonstration when we've got videos that are really handy. But something we do really want to highlight is the Beyond Carbon on this left hand side here, where if I come into my own test account, this is the current year's Beyond Carbon survey. And again, as we mentioned earlier on in this session, there's an opportunity to tell us a story about things that you've done, stories of change, case studies, things that you've been working on. This is where we'd love to see that really rich data. We then ask obviously quite a few questions on things such as if you have environmental policies, do you have ethical sponsorship, all the way through to your investments, your roles and responsibilities in your team, through to programming, engagement, your benefits you're experiencing. And a lot of them, as you can see, are kind of like yes, no, in the next 12 months, not sure, not applicable. So again, you don't necessarily need to have that really raw data set that you might need for a carbon footprint. You can kind of just answer it as you go. And if you're really not sure, you can just sort of leave it blank. That's not a problem, although we'd love to have it as full as possible. In terms of resources on here, if you come over to, again, sort of your organizational account in the top right hand side and come through to resources, this is where pretty much the library of every possible resource we have available directly supporting the tools lives and exists. So this is things such as the bite-sized videos, which will take you through to YouTube. And it has real kind of 5-minute clips, 3-minute clips of how to do specific business travel uploads, or how to do your fleet travel, or how to enter your energy data. We then have user guides, so it's the same type of content in a slightly different way of, almost like a scroll through user guide FAQ style versus a video, and then templates also to support your data capturing if you might haven't. We know quite a lot of organizations have like a big spreadsheet of their own kind of business travel data perhaps that exists outside of that, and that's a really helpful way to pull that over and get that included. We have some of the more back end side of things of like the methodology and the conversion factors that the tools exist on. So if you're ever unsure of, why is that figure like that, or I'm not quite sure how that's been calculated, if you have to write it for your environmental report or a policy that you might be creating, this is a really great place to find exactly that, and it will tell you where everything comes from, the resource where it exists, and also the reference of where it's found, along with how the calculations are performed. We do find that obviously some organisations will like do their footprint on here and then take it offline to manipulate that data themselves. So that can be a really handy guide to also support that if that's something you choose to do. But as you can see, there's a lot of different things here, all the way through like your general navigation to your office footprinting, through to kind of operational waste estimators. So definitely take a look at that. And then the one last thing that I referenced right at the very start is your documents. So if you have an environmental policy or an action plan, please feel free to upload them in here. This can be really helpful as a way of kind of centering all your environmental data, both your carbon and your beyond carbon, and then the policies and action plans you might have internally. Obviously, if you have numerous colleagues who access this account as well, they can all see this as well. It can really act as a nice way to kind of bookmark and keep reference of your progress and your plans and policies. So please do ensure you do that. I will now come back to wrap up on, hopefully this will be fairly seamless. Hopefully we're all good to go on there. And thanks there for the enthusiastic nod. We love that. And we said this, we've run this session twice, and we really wanted to make sure we give time to this point specifically, that we've run through a load of different areas today on how to measure and improve your data and add more data and build on data quality. And we recognize that by doing that, which is brilliant and exactly what we want in carbon reporting, actually it's extremely likely that that will increase the amount of carbon that is in your footprints. And that is completely okay and expected. Improving your data quality is super important on your sustainability journey, as it allows you to account for more of your carbon impact and identify ways to improve. So please don't be afraid to report more data, as that's exactly what we would love you to do if you have it now available. This is a really great example that we like to share from Shambhala Festival, who actually publicly acknowledged that their carbon footprint increased super significantly due to this exact thing of improved data quality, both from submitting data that's more granular, so actually, perhaps going from sort of distance traveled in their business travel to then the litres of fuel that they used, through to also then expanding actually what they were reporting on. So they brought more things into the fold that they were reporting. As you can see, they took this opportunity and embraced it and shared this story with their stakeholders, sharing really honestly what had changed and why. And is a really great way to communicate transparently about your carbon footprint, but also the journey you've been on to in terms of continually improving your data. So we just wanted to highlight that if suddenly this year perhaps you add more data in than previous years and you go, oh my goodness, this has become so much bigger, that's okay. If you know, that's completely fine, and we're always here to help just kind of contextualize that as well through our support desk. As we head into our final section for today, we'll just cover some real high level top tips and next steps, as I know we've covered lots and lots, but these will help kind of bring it down to some real things you can take away from the session this afternoon. And to wrap us up, some key principles that we always really talk about when we do environmental reporting webinars is to firstly embrace imperfection. So when starting on your journey, embrace that some things will very much likely take time, and that is so okay. Although, again, it'd be brilliant to have the most perfect data quality and data set in your first round, it's very unlikely that it's going to be the case, and I would love to see that ever happen in carbon reporting. Building on your data definitely takes time, and don't let that stop you from taking action now. So Tanay has obviously mentioned some things, especially around like investments of things that you may not necessarily report on, have data for, but you can start taking action on regardless of that fact. So definitely reference those slides further back for some of those ideas. Small can still be mighty. So speaking to that point exactly, doing something is better than doing nothing. And we recommend not to try and measure everything at once because it can be super overwhelming. And obviously with stretched capacities and resourcing, we recognise that that's also really quite a challenge for a lot of organisations we work with. So just take it one step at a time. And over those years, you'll have a really robust way of reporting those impacts. So thirdly, using your influence. This is a real chance to engage teams, talk to your suppliers, inspire change, and it's a great opportunity to build on existing connections and bring everyone on your journey too. And finally, if you're familiar with sustainability, collaboration is key, is pretty much everywhere. And sustainability truly cannot be tackled alone or by one person or even by one team. So get different teams involved, get different colleagues involved, and work together to help take action. You know, if you split that load across numerous teams and people, that really helps to make it a little bit easier to do and take action on. So collaboration is really at the core of all of this, and so are people. As a reminder for those who maybe joined just after when we spoke about the reporting deadlines for this current reporting window, it is now open. It's been open for a week and does close at the end of the day on Friday, the 26th of June. So please make sure you're uploading and submitting data before that point to be included in this year's annual environmental report. We have loads of resources available which can support no matter where you are on your journey, and they can be found on our website too. Obviously, these are all hyperlinks, so when we share these slides, you will have these that you can just click through to. And I've seen Tanea really wonderfully popping them in the chat sort of as we've been going, but they do include everything we covered already, along with the things on the resources page on the CC Tools. So please do take a look at that. And across the reporting period, alongside sessions like this that we've run today for that Scope 3 focus, it's really key. We will actually have a number of drop-in sessions should you find yourself really unsure of any environmental reporting questions in sort of like early to middle of June. They may be things sort of like if you've got technical support questions on reporting your data, or if you want to improve on your data quality, you know, how best to do that for specific areas. And also as a real good way, so if you're not sure exactly what resource might be best for you and your question, we can direct you directly there. Those links will go live really shortly on our website, so please do keep a lookout, and they will be posted across socials too. So make sure you follow us, which is a really smooth segue into if there's any way you want to contact us, but also be aware of things that are coming down the pipeline for resources or sessions, and those one-to-one drop-in sessions specifically. Please engage with us or follow us on like LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube, and sign up to our newsletter. So that's a really useful way that for any resources or support we'll be offering, they will be shared in that newsletter. So we would really encourage you to sign up there. And then, as always, some of you may, I think I've seen a few names that I recognise who I've actually helped support previously, but the support@juliesbicycle.com email address is a free to use help desk function for environmental reporting MPOs. So if you do have questions, please chat to us on there, and we can give some support via email that way. I'm going to take a pause. We're going to do a moment of reflection before we stop recording and come back so we can all kind of see each other and have a bit of a Q&A. But we have covered lots. There's a lot to digest. It may well be the case that you're like me, that you'll go away from this session and go, oh, that's a question I wish I'd asked. But there's ways you can obviously ask that after today. But we have a final question from our Slido with the QR code on the top left-hand side of what is a key takeaway from the session today? So it'd be really lovely to know if there's one or more, maybe, things that you're taking away from the session. That would be great to see. And again, they are completely anonymous, so you're welcome to write whatever you like, within reason, I must say. But it would be really great to see sort of some things that maybe landed or have given you ideas to take forward from the session. That is a great first answer, inspiration. So thank you to whoever popped that in there. That's great. So what scope 3 means? Wonderful. Okay, I'm glad we've managed to cover that, which is great. Sustainable suppliers from RBO. Yeah, great. Yeah, it's a really useful resource, and I think it was put in the chat and it will be shared afterwards as well. So definitely do take a look at that. Try and measure something. Definitely perfection doesn't really exist in carbon accounting ever. So just try and do little bits, and over time that builds a really great picture for your environmental footprint. Guidance, wonderful. Small is still mighty. Great. Yep, navigate the website and resources. Wonderful. Considering how we use the 15 categories as prompts. Yeah, that's a really good one of there's a lot. And again, I think Tanea mentioned that it is largely based at the GHG on a corporate reporting standard. So that a lot of the things that we might report on in the culture and art sector do feed in, but it isn't all encompassing, but they do provide a really nice way to sort of identify things that you can start measuring and reporting on aligned to that. So that's really great. And yet small changes can make a big impact. And I think I'll give it one last second just for anyone who might be typing away. I think there may be some, as it says, it's an active poll. But what we will do is, I've seen some questions sort of pop up in the chat, but we'll stop the recording. So it's off record. You can ask questions away, and then we'll stop sharing screens so we can actually all kind of engage and have some time together for the next sort of 20 minutes or so. Wonderful. Okay. How we might be able to measure and report on things